LeaderCast.
Hi, and welcome to Deep Leadership. I'm your host, John Rennie. Well, I hope all is well with you today. This is another special Wednesday morning episode brought to you by our new sponsor, Jeremy Clevenger Fitness, who we featured on episode 145. Now, if you haven't heard that episode, I encourage you to go back and take a listen. I have another great show lined up for you, but before we get started, I just wanted to remind you to take a look at the leadership books on my website. Harry Truman once said that not all readers are leaders, but all leaders are readers. So if you're not reading leadership books today, I highly encourage that you get started. I've written 3 leadership books, and I recommend you start with I Have the Watch first. It's filled with 22 short stories that will help you become a leader worth following. Now, it's a quick read, and most people finish it in less than 3 hours. It's available on Kindle and on Audible as well, so you can listen in the car or while you're working out. And a Spanish version is also in the works. So check out all my books either on Amazon or on my website, johnsrennie.com. Also, I wanted to mention that Deep Leadership is now ranked in the top 2.5% most popular shows out of 3 million podcasts globally, according to ListenScore. We're also closing in on the top 100 management podcasts in the U.S. So I want to thank each and every one of you for listening every week and sharing these episodes with your friends. You have helped this podcast grow into a top-performing show, so thank you very much. Well, that is it. Today we're going to be talking about self-leadership, and my guest is Andrew Bryant. He is the world's leading expert on self-leadership and the author of 3 amazing books. Now, he's here to help us understand how to master self-leadership, especially in a time of post-pandemic uncertainty. Now, this was an amazing discussion that I know you're going to love, so are you ready to dive in? Let's get started.
Welcome to Deep Leadership. Leadership is a people business. That's the philosophy of your podcast host, John Rennie. As a former Cold War submarine officer who spent 20 plus years leading businesses in corporate America before starting his own manufacturing business, he knows that leadership matters. Are you ready for some real-world actionable advice from John as well as his expert guests?
I'm ready.
The show starts right now.
Welcome to the Deep Leadership Podcast. Today I'm joined by Andrew Bryant. Andrew is a leadership coach, author, and keynote speaker. He is the founder of Self-Leadership International and is considered a world-leading expert on self-leadership. Andrew has coached hundreds of leaders and leadership teams to become the best versions of themselves and to scale their companies. He's written a new book called The New Leadership Playbook, Being Human While Successfully Delivering Accelerated Results, which helps readers become more effective leaders in a post-pandemic world. So I'm excited to have him on the show to talk about it. So Andrew, welcome.
Well, thank you, John. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, it's good to meet you, and congratulations on this book, because I think it's much needed right now. So I'm excited that I got a chance to read it, and I'm excited to talk to you about it firsthand. So let's get started with so tell us about your background. How does somebody become a global expert in self-leadership, which I absolutely love?
Yeah, well, it's, Steve Jobs says you join the dots backwards. So I'm British by birth. I'm Australian by passport. I'm Asian by the fact that I lived there for 18 years, and I'm Brazilian by wife, and I live in Portugal. So, I get to move around a bit. But as an English grammar schoolboy, I was a good science student, and I had planned to do medicine. Ironically, I thought I'd look good in a mask. Little did I know that I'd have 2 years of wearing one. But so I was destined to do medicine. They merged my boys' grammar school with the girls' high school just before university exams. And, I'll leave the rest to your listeners and imagination. I got distracted. And I had a second choice, which was physiotherapy. I think in the US you call it physical therapy, but it's in the UK it's kind of a mix between physical therapy, chiropractor, and in those days I got interested in sport. And I graduated in 1982. In the mid 80s, I was working with sports teams. And my curiosity shifted from the physical to the psychological. In the mid 80s, if you think back, was the beginning of the research on goal setting. It wasn't until the 1990s that positive psychology came out. And so I was there in the trenches, as it were, thinking about how do we help people and teams to perform their best, what rituals work, what training works. And I moved to Australia, and Australia is sports mad, as you probably know. And I helped a team win a championship, and that team was sponsored by a company. And the managing director of that company said to me, "Hey, Andrew, you helped my team win. Now come and work with my management team because they suck." And it was Australia, so that kind of vernacular was the norm. And so I went, okay. And I went in with basically a blank sheet of paper, and I watched and observed behavior. That's what my training as a physiotherapist taught me to do, was to watch. Physios watch how somebody throws something, how somebody jumps. And I watched how the managers communicated and I could quickly see their individual drivers and the group drivers of behavior. And I was able to map out a play for them to be better. And I got results. So that was the beginning of the journey. But of course, as everybody does, I had some imposter syndrome. I'm like, well, I've moved from physio to consultant. I need to go and do an MBA. So off I went to do an MBA in Western Australia, in Perth. And I started doing the organizational leadership and psychology course. And I started arguing with the lecturers, as you do. They encourage it, of course. And I had one really great lecturer who said, "Andrew, you've got some really good ideas. Stop arguing with me. Go write your own book." And the rest, as they say, is history.
Yes. So interesting. So you came from a sport background and brought that into the business world. And it's interesting that so many leadership people I talk to I talk to a lot of coaches, sports coaches, and then there's a lot of parallels between leading a sports team and leading a business. And so it's interesting that some of those crossed over, and you saw those cross over in your career. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I was one of the sports psychology wasn't as mature as it is now. If I'd stayed in the field, there are some very celebrity sports coaches. There are parallels. There are differences too. I mean, the difference, of course. I get booked as a motivational speaker, and often you'll get a sports person say, this is how we train for the championship, and everybody goes away very motivated, and that's all good. The difference, as anybody in an organization knows, is it's a marathon without a break.
100%. No break.
It's an ultra marathon. I mean, as a sports person, right? Yeah, okay, you train for the race, you race, and then you get the adrenaline rush and the celebration, and you get you get some time to recover.
Yeah.
Management teams run at a goal, and they run at all sorts of goals. They're running towards IPO, or they're running towards acquiring a company, or being acquired, or the end of the quarter. And the end of the quarter, we hit our numbers, yay! Bottle of champagne, and then the next day, the new quarter starts all over again.
Yeah,
and they got to do the whole thing again, and then somebody moved the goalpost. So I think there is a difference. There are similarities. The difference is you don't get the break.
Yeah, you never get the break. Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about self-leadership. I know I have a definition in my mind what I think it is, but tell us how you view self-leadership, and how does it bring leaders and teams together, and how do you teach it such that it does bring them together?
So this takes me back to the late 90s when I'd started, I'd started working with companies, and I'd started speaking about performance and how you do it. And I was looking for a term. And as a coach, you always work on the inside out. There's a great book called the Inner Game of Tennis, which shows there's a mindset, and then there's the physical behavior. So I always talked about the inside out. That had been a strong metaphor for me. And around about 1998, 1999, I was talking to a friend and saying what I was doing, and he said, "Oh, you mean self-leadership?" And I said, "That's it." And I thought I'd invented the term at that point. But when I later researched the origins of self-leadership, which comes in around self-learning, self-regulation, self-control, there's a lot of various theories. I discovered that a guy called Charles Mance had used the term in 1987, which predated me. So I didn't invent it. Mance talked about it was a process of self-influence. In my 2012 book, Self-Leadership, How to Become a More Successful, Efficient, and Effective Leader from the Inside Out, with Dr. Anna Kazan, we define self-leadership as the practice of intentionally influencing your thinking, feeling, and actions towards your objectives. And if I can break that down for your audience, it's a practice. Like taking a shower is a practice. Cleaning your teeth is a practice. If you don't do those things on a regular basis, you are going to stink. And self-leadership is like that. I've been teaching self-leadership for over 20 years, but my wife every now and again, if I'm having a meltdown, will say, go self-leadership yourself. So it's a practice of, and it's about being intentional about our thinking, feeling, and actions. And leaders need to be intentional. I mean, the whole point about leadership is it is a process of influence, self-influence first before we can influence others. You can't say, do as I say, not as I do. People role model your behaviors. And as a leader, we have to be very self-aware of what narratives, what thinking we have, how do we feel about a situation, and edit those narratives as we articulate them to somebody else. Right? During the pandemic, it was terrifying. People didn't know, what was going to happen to their businesses. The leaders needed to have a narrative to tell their followers, otherwise everybody would have panicked, right? And you, with a military background, as you know, when things are going pear-shaped, you need to be managing that narrative so that others will follow you. If you lose the plot, everybody loses the plot, and the outcome is not good.
Yeah, I mean, I've always put the analogy towards, being at sea and you have rough seas and it's things you're facing unknowns. Everyone's looking at the captain to make sure that he knows what he's doing, right? And that's what happens in a crisis too. The people look to the leader to say, does he have a plan? Does she have a plan, right? Is there, are they in control of the situation, even though, the outside world may be out of control, but do they have a plan? And they're looking for you to confirm that. And if you announce a panic, they're going to panic too, and they're going to reflect your emotions through that journey.
Yeah, and that's very true. I mean, it doesn't mean that the leader can't say, these are tough times. That is the Stockdale paradox, which I'll refer to in a moment. But there's a great nautical poem, of course, which is Invictus, which was the poem much loved by Nelson Mandela. And the last part of that poem is, it matters not how straight the gate, how charged with punishment the scroll. I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul. Yeah. And there in poetry is the heart of self-leadership, is that I choose to be the captain of my soul. I choose some level of self-direction, regardless of what's happening around me. And I often say, we don't choose the time, place of our birth. Within a few moments of coming into this world, we're given a name, a nationality, an ethnicity, and possibly a religion and a football team to follow. So, we've been framed, we've been programmed from the get-go, as you would say in the US. And it takes quite a lot of energy to go, you know what, this is the course I want to choose. Yeah. All right. Not just because it's a peer group. You say, this is, love my parents, love my upbringing, but this is what I want to do. And that's it. The Stockdale paradox, you probably know it because it comes from Admiral Stockdale, who was interviewed by Jim Collins for his book, Good to Great.
One of my favorite books. We talk about it all the time on this show. So you're up my alley.
Well, Admiral Stockdale had done a philosophy class on Stoicism before he became a prisoner of war during the American-Vietnam conflict. And notice I say American-Vietnam conflict, not Vietnam War, because I lived in Asia and the Vietnamese call it the American War. So it's all a matter of perspective, isn't it?
It is.
But Stockdale was, as you know, was a prisoner, and the Stockdale paradox is the ability to face the worst possible reality whilst not losing hope that we will prevail. Yeah. And that really is a practice of self-leadership right there.
Absolutely. And if you're an entrepreneur, you live by that principle. I started my company 6 years ago, and I've had to live by that principle for a good part of that. So absolutely.
Yep. Very good.
Yeah. So, you've written 2 best-selling leadership books on self-leadership, and now you've focused your attention to effective leading in this post-pandemic era. So why did you feel the need to write this new book, the new Leadership Playbook? What was the origin story behind it?
It was a request from a client. So this is my 4th book, and I never say never. I thought I was done. I don't really identify as an author, even with 4 books, but So I was working with a Silicon Valley client. I worked with the CEO and the executive leadership team. And it was the chief people officer, Mel, came to me and said, look, Andrew, we need what you've done for the leadership team, and we need to scale that down through the organization to the middle managers, the first managers. So we need a very practical framework that they can use. And could you do that? And I said, well, back in the day, I did basic management training, and I've got the source material and I know how I would want to change it. But, what's your budget? And she had a number and it was okay, but it was like, yeah, it's a lot of work for that. I said, can I hang on to the IP and then I'll write my own book? And she said, yeah, deal. And I went, okay, fine, it's a deal. So I wrote the book for them, a handbook, which gave them their way of managing their cultural book. And then I'm sitting on all this, and then I developed it. And, it was the midst of the pandemic. People were crying out for very practical leadership skills. And what I'd done for that organization is I basically identified 10 conversations that leaders have. And I called them plays, stealing from the American football concept of a series of behaviors. I expanded it out to 12 for the new Leadership Playbook, identifying there are 12 conversations that you have every week, every month as a leader, and how do you do them well? And those conversations are driven by principles. So I talked about the principles and a framework for leadership. But what I think makes this book different, and I know I'm selling the book, but most books are, at 36,000 feet looking down at leadership. You know that people need, okay, I'm stuck. I'm in this scenario. How do I lead myself out of this?
Yeah.
And if you've got a conversation written down and you say, oh, well, here's an example, then you can, I find I personally learn very well. When somebody shows me how to do something, I go, okay, I can learn from that and I can apply that over here. And that was the intention of this book.
Interesting. And I like the way you've done it. You lay out these plays and these conversations, which we'll talk about it in a little bit. But what are, as you see it and you're involved with a number of different businesses around the country and you're helping leaders, what are some of the challenges of being a post-pandemic leader? What has changed in our leadership environment these days?
Well, I actually came across some research just very recently. I was interviewing somebody who was in knowledge management, and her and her partner had done some great research around how leaders are using social platforms. The intranet as opposed to the internet, the internal, they're using Microsoft Teams or they're using Yammer and it was interesting that they'd found only 8% of leaders were actually engaging people in conversation, in dialogue. And the leaders that I've been talking to are saying, our people are not engaged post the pandemic. We need to get them back in the office. And I went, well, that's a false equivalence, right? Okay, there's a decrease in engagement, absolutely, but is getting them back to the office? Because I know when they were in the office, they weren't engaged.
Right.
and I witnessed a lot of people during the pandemic gain a lot of greater autonomy, greater self-drive. Mothers were able to rearrange their work around their kids and, do the work at night because asynchronous work came in. So I looked at this research and I looked at the practical skills I had. And I think what leaders are struggling with is leaders are very good at broadcasting. Here's what we want to have happen. Yeah. Here's what's happening. Here's what has happened. But now, post-pandemic, people want to be engaged. They want to be part of the conversation and go, okay, these are the challenges we're facing. Here's what I'm thinking about doing. Do you have input? And that's what drives engagement. So post-pandemic, you've got this huge, it's called a great resignation. Lots of people leaving organizations. As soon as, economic factors are keeping people in, but they're not engaged unless the leaders are engaging them. Yeah. And so leaders have to have conversations, hence writing 12 conversations. So that's the shift. You cannot imagine that just because the pandemic is now an endemic, that you're just going to return to business as usual. That is ludicrous. It's insanity. And the clients that are engaging me are saying, okay, how do we not slide back into old habits?
We'll be right back after a quick word from our sponsors.
Leadership skills are like any other skills. You need to practice them to get better at them. Best-selling leadership author John S. Rennie knows this. That's why he's written a new book called You Have the Watch. It's a guided journal for leaders designed to take you through an entire year of leadership training. By the end of the year, you will master 50 of the most important leadership skills. If you want to have a greater impact on the results and people in your organization, go to youhavethewatch.com and pick up your copy today.
This podcast is brought to you by Jeremy Clevenger Fitness. As a high-performing leader, you know that leadership isn't about telling people what to do, it's about leading by example. And for most people, the one area they are lacking when it comes to leading by example is their health and fitness. By improving your health and fitness, every other area of your life improves. But how do you get and stay fit as a busy leader? Well, you do what you've always done. You hire the best person for the job. Now, don't struggle on your own. Put Jeremy Clevenger on your team. Jeremy will work with you to help take your physique, mindset, nutritional habits, and more to the next level with his step-by-step, all-inclusive coaching program. Now, I've worked with Jeremy for the past year, and I'm in the best shape of my life. So if you want to step up your game, reach out to Jeremy at jeremyclevengerfitness.com to find out more and get your initial consultation scheduled with him today. This episode is brought to you by the Fraternity of Excellence. The Fraternity of Excellence is an online and real-world community for men who are looking to improve in all areas of their lives. The men of FOE are working together to become better husbands, fathers, and leaders at work and in their communities. They live by a simple philosophy: as iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another. Now, I've been a member for more than 3 years, and for me, I finally found a brotherhood of men that I was missing from my time in the military. Now, I love being around guys who are dedicated to becoming a better version of themselves. So if you're interested in becoming a man of excellence as well, go to fraternityofexcellence.com, or you can reach out directly to me to learn more. People were given some autonomy during the pandemic, and they like it. They're like, wait a second, I can, like you said, I can take care of my kids and I can work. I can work at my own pace or at my own schedule, if you will. And they want people now bosses are saying, come back to the office. Let's go back to, I'll put you in a box for 8 hours a day. And people are saying, wait a second, and I think that's a bit of a challenge too. And I think people got that autonomy and they like it and they want to have some level of it in their lives still. And I think that's the dilemma that leaders face. How do we continue some of that, but also, go back to some of the ways we used to do things? So you talk about two things. And what's interesting, you say that that being a good post-pandemic leader requires a balance of empathy and accountability with accountability. Talk to us about the empathy and accountability and how those play with what you just talked about earlier.
I say it's a post-pandemic, but I actually think that was true before the pandemic. I think it's really become to the fore, right? So leaders have to deliver results, right? If you're a leader and you don't deliver on results, your tenure is limited, right? Yes. Yeah. However, despite AI and digital transformation and automation, we still get results with and through people. Mm. And so if you don't engage the people, you won't get the results. Now, the Navy SEALs have this, how does it go? Slow is smooth, smooth is fast.
Yes.
Right? So spending the time engaging the people seems like it takes time, but then you get the accelerated results because they now are empowered, they have autonomy, they have buy-in. And so because you care about your people, it takes a bit longer, but you'll get to your destination faster. Mm. And just encouraging people. So, the whole, drive the numbers. We saw through the pandemic that organizations that retain people were the ones that go, well, we're not just going to fire people because we're not making money. We're going to be empathetic. How can we restructure? How can we put people on furlough? How do we keep people looked after? And those companies have kicked back. One of my clients, we worked through looking after their people through the pandemic, and they've just had 3 massive quarters because they kept the key people. So as soon as things turned up again, or ticked up, whatever you want to say, They were ready. The people were engaged. Bang. Whereas other organizations are running around scrambling to get staff. I don't know if you've been through an airport lately, but there are no
Yes.
check-in staff. There are no
Nothing.
security staff.
Nobody.
There are no immigration staff. But there are lines and lines and lines of people because the airline industry, and the security, they laid everybody off. And you can't just hire those people back instantaneously. There's nobody wanting to load your luggage. And that's a disaster, isn't it? So, always look after your people, and your people will look after your customers. I mean, that was Virgin Airlines' motto from Mr. Richard Branson.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny. I ran my first manufacturing plant in 1999, and we had tremendous results. After I was there 3.5 years, and we had just record results. We were the top performing plant out of our division, and all of it was engaging people. Just spending time on the shop floor, learning where the mistakes were, where the challenges were, where the tooling was bad, where the procedures were wrong, and actually listening to people and making the changes based on their feedback and their input. And we ended up having all these record results. And it was funny because the other general managers were trying to figure out how I did it. And I said, it wasn't that difficult. We just engaged the people. So we did the hard work of, like you said, we went slow, but we ended up moving faster because we engaged the teams, we engaged the people. And I think it was hard. The other general managers wanted a quick fix, and they're like, well, it can't be that easy. I'm like, no, actually it was that easy. It was just getting people, bought in or involved in the whole process of running the plant. What can we do? What would you recommend we do to be able to improve this operation versus the guy in the corner office making the decisions on everything? I think that was, and again, it worked in 1999. It can work today, and especially now, it needs to be working today. We need to be listening to our folks. Yeah.
It does. And I mean, my book's not for you. My book is for those people who wanted the quick fix to read,
right?
Because they need to know, because they don't know how to have those conversations.
Yeah.
And now we also have to have those conversations through this medium. You and I are chatting through Zoom. People might only be listening to this on a podcast without the visuals. By the way, I don't have any hair. But how quickly you and I engaged each other just in the 5 minutes before we pressed record. That skill to connect with people through Zoom, a lot of people have struggled with that. The ability to look down the barrel of a webcam rather than look at your keyboard. The number of people I've had, who use laptops. So I've said, look, if you're doing a Zoom call, very simple. Get a stack of books, put your laptop on the stack of books, and bring the screen forwards so the camera's looking at you, not up your nose. Yeah, and just, I'm looking at you down the barrel of a 35 millimeter camera because I broadcast my material in high definition, but. It just, 2 years into the pandemic, some people were still doing it. And I'm like, has nobody told you that this is a really bad idea, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We've had a lot of guests on the show talking about hybrid meetings and doing virtual meetings properly, but it's all about connecting with the person on the other side of the screen. That person's not there, but the camera is that person. And sometimes we forget that. And sometimes I get on calls and you see somebody's ear because their camera's somewhere where they're looking somewhere else. And that's not a good way to communicate. So in general, that's important. So in this book, the new Leadership Playbook, you lay out a new leadership framework model, and you introduce this. And you say that it helps us drive accelerated results. Could you talk a little bit about that, the framework model that you have in the book?
Yes. So it is clear expectations, times mindset and motivation, times right behaviors equals accelerated results. And as I said, this book was commissioned by a client, and I went back to some of the management trainings I'd done years ago, and I used to, when I ran a class, and whether it was for a company or an MBA class that I taught as an external faculty, I would tell managers, you need to go get yourself a mirror. Right. Well, I used to build the story out. There's a piece of equipment you need to buy, and everybody get their notebook out. And I go, yeah, it's a mirror. Because if you're not getting results, the first place you look is in the mirror. Yes. Because we fail abysmally because we fail to set clear expectations. We have a mental picture in our mind of what we want, and we assume telepathically the other person is going to understand exactly what we want. And when they deliver what they thought we wanted and it's not what we wanted, we're all upset, and yet we're at fault. And so that feedback loop of, hey, these are my expectations. Let me understand what you understand by that. That's not condescending. That's, let's make sure we're both on the same page.
Oh yeah,
right?
yeah.
You've got to, communication comes from the Latin communio, which means to share, and it means shared meaning and understanding. And back to that point I made earlier, leaders broadcast, they don't communicate. They haven't created the feedback loop.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because in my second book, All in the Same Boat, I talk about something we use in the Navy called verbatim repeat back. And so you would give an order, like to the helmsman, and he would repeat that command back to you. And it was a process of, I gave a command and you repeat back the command. So I understood so I knew that you understood what the command was before we executed it. And so it was like a chance to double check the order. And so I actually made that equivalent to, like, as business leaders, we need to make sure our people truly understand what the objective is before they embark on it. Because the worst thing you can do is send somebody off on a project, and they come back and the results are nothing like what you expected, because there wasn't clear understanding right in the get-go. So it's exactly what you're talking about.
We are, but there's in a command is fairly binary. Turn left, turn right, port, starboard, right. We also have to ask, what does that mean to you? Because humans have this incredible ability to translate something, right?
Based into their own context.
It's not just what did I say, because sometimes people can repeat verbatim exactly what you said, but it meant something completely different
in their mind.
Them,
yes,
right?
yes, yeah.
So there is this, you've got one of your books behind you with the submarine, and of course, submarine has sonar, and it's sending out the ping and receiving the pong, and it's a constant iteration.
Yeah.
And we really have to change our mind in leadership. Is you don't broadcast once; it's constant iteration. What did you understand? Observing the behavior, making the adjustments. And it's the same with relationships, right? Husbands and wives, get this wrong all the time. It's, I said this, you should understand. Or worse, I didn't say it and you're supposed to know what I meant. And all the men listening to this going, yeah, that's what my wife does. The expectation. So firstly, be really clear. Here's what my expectations are. And, and again, I'm going to get real trouble with sort of gender stereotypes here, but, if the wife likes flowers, tell him you like flowers, and then he'll go, oh, she likes flowers, I'll go get flowers. Expecting him to be, to be telepathic is not a great way if you want flowers. You might get them, you might not, but it's a bit random. Anyway, so the next is mindset and motivation. And clearly, once the person has received instructions, do they have a growth mindset that they can try something new, get the feedback, or do they have a very fixed mindset? If I get this wrong, I'm going to lose face. And are they motivated to improve? And in the book, of course, I deconstruct motivation. Motivation very much is intrinsic, as you know. You can reward people temporarily, but usually motivation is, if I put in effort, will I get an improvement in my performance? If I get an improvement in my performance, is that going to be validated, recognized, appreciated, rewarded? And are those rewards the sort of rewards that I want? Right? So as a leader, we have to understand that we want to engage people that they have buy-in and that they feel that they're going to make progress. And the last piece, of course, is right behaviors. And all the mindset in the world, without the right behaviors, won't get you the results. So if somebody has the right, what we would call attitude, are they translating those into the behaviors that work? And so the ability to observe behaviors and give accurate feedback on those behaviors will give you the accelerated results. And that means it means observation, and it means conversation. Even if you aren't with the person, you can create an observation of what they did, right? So when you're on a Zoom call, you can still say, so how did the meeting go? Who was at the meeting? What did you say? How was it received? When they said that, how did you respond? And very quickly listening, you can see, well, I got upset that they said this. Okay, so getting upset, did that serve your purpose? No, they left the meeting. Did we get the sale? No. Okay, so let's have a look at those behaviors. Did they work? No. What was your mindset? Well, I was irritated, right? Okay, so what was my expectation I shared with you? Be nice to the customer. Okay, so we have a problem somewhere in that framework, right? So I've been doing this for 25 years. Every management leadership problem I have ever come across, if I go, was there an expectation? Was there mindset and motivation? Were there right behaviors? If there was a failure, one of those or two or three of those was missing.
That makes sense.
And it's been just a fabulous diagnostic tool. So is it new? No. Is it new in terms of getting it in a book and showing it how people can use it in an everyday conversation and diagnostic? I hope so. I hope this adds value to people.
Yeah, absolutely. And just real quick, I wanted to just mention or ask you about, you've got these 12 plays that are in the book. Give us, you don't have to go through them all, but give us an overall view of what these are. Like you said, they're conversations to be had, right? So tell us just in general what they are and what leaders can use them for, and how do they make things better?
Sure. Look, well, the most powerful one I've almost articulated already, and that is the ability to give feedback in real time.
Yeah.
And, feedback is the breakfast of champions, but sometimes it tastes like cardboard when we get feedback, because we like to hear the good feedback. We don't like to hear the negative feedback.
Right.
And there's a lot of cultural nuance and power differential issues around giving feedback. The ability to create a psychological safe environment to say, here's what happened. Here are the facts. Do we agree that this is what happened? Yes. Do you know what the impact of what you just did is? And this allowing people to see the connection between what they did and the impact of that is very powerful. What was your intention, which is sort of another I, and they go, well, I wanted to do this. So this is what happened. This is the impact. That wasn't your intention. Therefore, what are you going to do next in the future? And then that'll lead you into coaching. Start, stop, continue. So to feedback, if you've set the objectives clearly, feedback allows you then to move into a coaching conversation about how to improve.
Yeah.
So, if there was only one play in the book, it would be how to give and receive feedback. And that immediately makes a difference to anybody who reads that. I've got hundreds of testimonials of people say, I just did this and suddenly my management was better. I know when you wrote to me, you liked the Crucial Conversations one.
Yeah.
And so since you read that and since you wrote to me and said you liked that, I thought I'd better talk about that.
Sure.
What if feedback doesn't work? Because, you and I will get this all the time. I've set the expectations, I gave the feedback, and they still not working, right? So what did Jim Collins say? Get the right people on the bus, get the wrong people off the bus, and get everybody in the right seat, right? Well, it's a little bit like that. But before you just throw everybody off the bus, you want to have a conversation which is a level above feedback.
Yeah.
And I use the metaphor or the analogy of putting the fish on the table. If the fish is under the table, it'll rot and stink. If we can put the fish on the table, we can cook that fish, we can eat it together. It's a level of transparency and candor. And in coaching managers and leaders over the years, the ability to say, hey, look, this is happening. I'm frustrated. I'm not seeing the improvement. You said you were going to improve. Something's going on here, and I'm at a loss to understand what it is. Can you tell me? And the ability to have that, to be a manager, be vulnerable and say, I've got a narrative about that. It's triggering my emotions. I'm fundamentally giving you one last chance to say, tell me what's going on. And sometimes those conversations, we find that there's something we as a manager leader were completely unaware of. There was a process, a procedure, there was something, we had an assumption, we had a narrative about how that person was, and suddenly the lights come on and we go, oh my God, I read this situation wrong. And that can be resolved. Or we find this person really is in the wrong place, on the wrong bus, and really it becomes crystal clear that it would be better for all concerned if an exit was created.
Yeah.
But have the conversation.
I love that. I love that. It's so important that you have that conversation, because you're right. Sometimes you do uncover this family crisis or something you didn't know, or that was like that employee's behavior was different than what you would normally expect, and so and then you might find that reason before you take drastic actions. I think that's really important. And I think the other side of it too is, sometimes there's puzzle pieces that just don't fit in our puzzle. And they might fit in someone else's puzzle perfectly, but for what we need right now, it just doesn't fit in our puzzle. And so you do have to make those decisions with certain people that it's just, maybe it's best that we don't work together anymore. And I think the quicker you come to those conclusions, the better off you'll be than to have somebody that's a poor performer or has behavioral issues or is a toxic person in the organization. If you don't take action on that as a leader, everyone says, well, that must be acceptable behavior if that is allowed to continue. So I think it's important to make sure to find those people and work that out. Absolutely.
And have that conversation earlier rather than later. And so writing it down as a conversation, giving it a framework, has empowered the people who've read the book, and I've coached to have that, and it's been beneficial regardless of outcome. It's beneficial that they had the conversation. So those are 2 of the 12 plays, and obviously people are going to, if they want the other 10, people are going to need to buy the book. I am sorry,
and I do. So it's a great plug. So I do encourage leaders, you're listening in, and take a look at this book. It's called The New Leadership Playbook: Being Human While Successfully Delivering Accelerated Results. And we really just kind of, scratch the surface of some of the things that are in this book. I think it's really good. It's really well laid out. It's easy to read, and I think it can really help you be a more effective leader, especially in a time when we have to bring a lot more empathy to work these days. And this is a great way to do it, to have those conversations. And I really appreciate, Andrew, you coming on the show. Where can people go to find this book, learn about your company, or anything else?
Well, the domain selfleadership.com is where you'll pretty much find everything. You'll find my self-leadership work, and there's a link to the book. I did put a website, thenewleadershipplaybook.com, if you just want to have a look at that. I'm easy to find on LinkedIn under Andrew Bryant. And all online bookstores are covering it. So get your Kindle or your paperback. I've yet to record the audio. It's on my to-do list.
And that takes a lot of time too. So
yeah, you've done that, right?
No, I've outsourced it. So because it does take so long, and this is a part-time gig for me. I'm running my plant. So I actually had someone else read the book. So, but are you going to do it yourself?
Yeah, well, because I am a speaker, people want to hear my voice, right?
Yeah.
So,
well, plus you got the cool accent too, so you got to have your voice in there. Well, anyways, thank you, Andrew, for coming on the show and sharing all this information. I think the aspect of self-leadership, I think people who are listening, and I think you should dive deeper in that. Look at your other books that you've written, and in this new book as well. So I really encourage leaders to take a look at that. And if you want to be more effective, you've got to master some of these techniques that Andrew lays out in these books. So, Andrew, thank you for coming on the show, and thank you for sharing all this information.
It's been my pleasure, John. Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you again. Well, that's it for today. Thank you for listening to Deep Leadership. If you like this podcast, please subscribe and share so we can continue to build a world with better bosses. Until next time, this is John Rennie saying, take care and lead well.
Thank you for listening to Deep Leadership.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you for all you do.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode. For more information and updates, please visit our website at www.deepleadershippodcast.com or johnsrennie.com. Until next time, take care.
Hey, it's Tim from 50 Years of Music with 50-Year-Old White Guys, the comedy podcast you had no idea you needed. Join Ben, Jeff, and me as we continue our musical road trip back through the years and around the globe. See, just when you thought all white guys were like Joe Rogan, you come across 3 educators trying to remember when we were cool.
50 Years of Music with 50-Year-Old White Guys.
Electric acid. Welcome to Ringside with Ray and Prince. My name is Ray Leonard Jr.
Oh, is that the set? No, that's just my dad.
My name is Prince Daniels Jr.
Daniels again with a big home touchdown.
On this show, we come to humanize
athletes, entertainers, business executives. We're going to see what makes them tick.
Tuesdays, 10 a.m. Pacific time on Spotify, Apple, Amazon, and wherever you get your podcasts.
We'll see you there. Peace and power.
Electric acid.